Hi, and welcome to Creepy Crime Story, where the darkest truths aren't imagined, they're real. 4:30 a.m., Mountain Brook, Alabama. Sodium lights wash a quiet school parking lot behind the high school athletic complex. One body, a handful of spent casings. No crowds, no commotion, just a scene that compresses a night out into a timeline measured in minutes. In towns like this, murders don't just break laws, they tear at the fabric of a calm community. Here's what we'll establish quickly: how the window of time narrows, why this case never becomes a capital trial spectacle, and what changed afterward because one woman had asked for help earlier in the year. Patrol arrives first. Perimeter is set. The asphalt is dry, lighting adequate, and vehicle traffic minimal at that hour. Officers document what is present and equally what is absent. There is no evidence of property theft in plain view, no signs of a dragged body, no tire squeals scoring that suggests a last-second evasive maneuver. The positioning of the victim and the casing pattern indicate a rapid assault at the location. From this moment forward, the lot behind the ball fields is treated as the primary scene. That designation will not change. Crime scene technicians begin a standard protocol: wide shots, mid-range, then close-ups. Each casing receives an evidence marker. Distances are measured. Trajectories are preliminarily noted with stringing only after photography is complete. The initial impression points to a handgun discharge at close range, but no caliber claim is made on the asphalt. That level of specificity will wait for the lab. The chain of custody starts now. Casings bagged, swabs taken where touch transfer is most likely, and a meticulous inventory of anything on or near the victim that could establish sequence or contact. Identification is withheld until next of kin is notified. The story doesn't rush it. Investigators widen the circle from the parking lot outward, first to the school perimeter cameras and any city-facing lenses aimed toward the access roads, then to nearby businesses that might have recorded approaching or departing vehicles. They request a canvas for late-night joggers, delivery drivers, or maintenance staff who could place sound or motion in a narrow time band. The objective is not to speculate, but to shrink uncertainty, establish a latest known alive and an earliest known discovery, then close the gap with verifiable data. You'll hear one line from the case file again: the data aligned cleanly. Sometimes that was the problem. Clean data can seduce an investigation into skipping steps. Here, procedures hold. The lot is secured longer than convenient, and the path from the previous evening to this pavement is built piece by piece, from cameras, receipts, and later lab results that either confirm or contradict what the eye wants to believe. Tonight's story begins with a fixed point: a woman shot in the parking lot behind Mountain Brook High School's athletic complex in the early hours of December 1st, 2019. No alternate scene, no second ending. Victimology starts with the person, not the injury. Megan Montgomery was 31, embedded in Birmingham area routines that investigators could verify without guesswork. Weekdays meant work, gym time, and recurring volunteer commitments. Weekends added restaurant meetups and planned social events. Digital traces reflected that rhythm: calendar blocks, message threads with consistent contacts, loyalty card pings at the same businesses, geotags that matched her daily commute. Establish the baseline and you see deviations clearly. That is the point of victimology. Reduce the noise so the signal of the last night stands out. Friends described her as organized and responsive. That claim was testable. Her phone showed pattern regularity, prompt replies before midnight on ordinary nights, music app sessions during workouts, a short sequence of location checks near favored venues. Investigators didn't need sentiment to confirm character. They needed corroboration. Bank records and point-of-sale receipts matched what her friend said she planned that weekend. When the homicide unit pulled those receipts against camera timestamps, the schedule held up. No unexplained gaps early in the evening. No second set of venues outside her normal footprint. A clean front half of the night tightens the back half. Megan's recent history also included attempts to safeguard herself. Earlier in 2019, she engaged law enforcement and support resources regarding relationship violence. That statement stays factual, on the record, and it matters because it changes risk assessment. Cases like this are evaluated for escalation patterns around a separation or breakup. The team flagged that context and then set it aside until hard evidence, from cameras, devices, or lab work, either connected it to the final hours or did not. In towns like Mountain Brook, murders aren't just crimes. They stress a community that assumes safety. The investigative response has to be clinical enough to cut through that stress. The technical work continued. Analysts mapped her device activity over the previous 6 weeks and built a template of typical Saturday night movement for her. They overlaid that template on the final night. Alignments were good until late evening, then narrowed into a tighter corridor toward the school complex. Her social messages showed no sudden hostility, no new names, and no hints about a rendezvous outside her usual circle. That absence is a finding too. No lure to an unfamiliar location, no evidence of a planned meet with a stranger. It supported the working theory that the last person she was seen leaving with was someone she knew well. This chapter doesn't identify that person. The purpose here is clarity, not revelation. Build the person, then the pattern, then the variance. If you're writing this into your own checklist, 1. Routine, 2. Deviations, 3. Risks previously documented, 4. Test each against verifiable data. The result is a victim profile that is respectful, practical, and usable in court. It also reminds viewers why prevention work matters. Megan had asked for help earlier in the year. Systems responded in parts. The investigation now has to resolve what the data say about the night she died. The data aligned cleanly. Sometimes that was the problem. Clean patterns can steer a case toward the obvious conclusion before the lab signs off. That is why the team kept the focus narrow. Finish the baseline, lock the timeline, and only then move to the last known movements that intersect the athletic complex lot. Chapter 3 will handle the 2019 risk documentation in detail and explain how those documents inform, but do not decide, a homicide file. This chapter moves from scene to file. Investigators compiled every document that could clarify risk before the homicide. Incident reports, dispatch audio logs, hospital summaries, and any advocacy notes permitted by law. The aim was not to decide guilt by history, but to understand whether the final hours fit a known escalation pattern. The rule was simple. Verify, catalog, and quarantine from conclusion until the lab and timeline evidence speak. February 2019 is the first anchor. A 911 call reported a domestic disturbance. Responding officers documented an injury to the victim's right forearm consistent with a close-range discharge during a struggle involving a duty handgun. Paramedics transported her. A physician treated the wound. State investigators reviewed circumstances and took statements. The firearms administrative handling was recorded under agency procedures then in effect. That file did not produce a felony charge. It did produce time-stamped facts. Dispatch time, scene arrival, medical transport, treatment notes. Those entries would later help the homicide team confirm that help-seeking occurred months before the shooting in the Mountain Brook High School athletic complex lot. March 2019 becomes the second anchor. The officer involved resigned from his department. Personnel actions do not determine criminal liability, so detectives logged the resignation as context only. It explained why subsequent references in public records read, "former officer." It also marked a transition point for advocacy. Safety planning notes, when available, typically emphasize predictable routines, check-ins with trusted contacts, and documenting deviations. Those measures are not theater. They are a practical scaffold for later investigative baselines. They gave analysts a cleaner picture of what a normal evening looked like for the victim in the months leading to November. May 2019 supplies the third anchor. Municipal records show a misdemeanor arrest for domestic violence in the third degree. Booking release and standard pretrial directives appear in the file. The directives, often including limited contact conditions, are designed to reduce immediate risk while a case moves through court. Homicide detectives did not treat that case as proof of what would happen in December. They treated it as an objective warning on paper that a relationship had entered a high-risk phase. The warning helped set interview priorities later. It did not shortcut the need for ballistics, surveillance, and digital corroboration tied to the night of the killing. With those three anchors verified, the team imposed discipline. No speculation about motive, no narrative leaps from prior harm to present homicide. The documents were placed where they belong in a modern homicide workflow, context that shapes questions, not answers. The next tasks were forward-looking and time-bound. Pull fixed location surveillance around the athletic complex and along the approach roads, align point-of-sale timestamps from the evening with camera captures, and extract device telemetry to map travel paths. Only those sources could legitimately connect a person from the last known social setting to the lot where the shooting occurred. A brief reflection is appropriate and proportional. A person asked for help earlier in the year. Systems responded in parts: law enforcement, medical care, and advocacy touchpoints. Many viewers will recognize that cycle. In towns like Mountain Brook, murders aren't just crimes. They strain families, neighbors, and institutions that expect quieter outcomes. The investigative response has to stay clinical enough to cut through that strain. That is why the team kept the history intact but separate, ready to be compared against evidence gathered after midnight rather than used as a stand-in for it. The data aligned too cleanly. Sometimes that was the problem. The line made the case briefing not because it was clever, but because clean alignments can tempt shortcuts. Here, the shortcut was refused. The file now held 3 verified warnings from 2019, but the homicide theory would live or die on what cameras, casings, and devices said about the last hours of November 30th into the first minutes of December 1st, 2019. To tighten the homicide window next, which would you process first? Fixed cameras near the athletic complex or device telemetry aligned to point-of-sale timestamps from the earlier evening. The case moves from paper to pixels. Detectives request every camera angle that can lawfully be pulled within a half-mile of the bar and restaurant corridor where the night began, and the access roads that feed the high school athletic complex. Fixed lens storefront cameras, a city pole cam near a traffic light, and the school district's exterior lots give overlapping slices of time. Nothing is left to guesswork. Timestamps are normalized to a single clock, then verified against the receipts already recovered in the first 24 hours. If the time shows 12 minutes between payment and a car rolling past the east lot, the footage must account for those 12 minutes. A clean sequence emerges. Megan is visible leaving a well-lit sidewalk with someone she knows well. No confrontation, no hurry. The door camera records them moving toward a parking area just off the main drag. A second angle, low resolution but usable, shows a vehicle that matches the make and color provided in witness notes. The tag frame can't be read from that distance, but the distinctive rear bumper decal helps carry the identification forward when the next camera picks them up. The distance between these lenses is short, the timing tight, and the route points toward the neighborhood where the school complex sits. Point-of-sale data locks the clock. A receipt with a rounded total appears at 11:03 p.m. local time. Employees confirm the registered time has not drifted off network sync. When detectives place that receipt against the moment the door camera catches them leaving, the difference is in seconds, not minutes. A downstream storefront camera shows headlights consistent with the earlier vehicle traveling east, then a turn that lines up with a known cut-through toward the athletic fields. This is where the line shrinks from a broad evening to a narrow corridor. In towns like this, the roads sleep early. Late-night movement stands out. The school district's exterior cameras are not designed for investigative beauty shots. They monitor access and lighting. But one lens catches the sweep of the parking lot where the homicide occurred. The footage is dark, but serviceable. A vehicle enters the frame, pauses, and then rolls out of view. The camera does not capture the act. It captures the approach and the time window in which the shooting had to occur. That window will later matter when mapped against phone activity in the absence of any other vehicles entering or leaving the lot. Limited visibility doesn't weaken the file because the timing is strong and the cameras upstream already narrowed who matters. Detectives track back to confirm there are no alternate routes that would have bypassed the captured angles. They request neighboring homeowners' doorbell clips for the same band of time. 2 provide footage voluntarily. One shows nothing but a cat triggering the sensor at 12:00 a.m. The other records a vehicle passing at a speed consistent with the earlier car as the corridor nears the school. It's not proof by itself, but it's alignment, and alignment is how modern timelines harden. The work is slow, frame by frame, but once the path is clear, the next step is clear too. Contact the person last seen with Megan and schedule an interview in a controlled setting. The interviews do not start yet. The team's discipline is to finish the timeline before the conversation. A partial story invites denials to fill gaps. A full sequence forces explanations to fit facts. With normalized timestamps, they now know the last time Megan is seen on commercial video, the approximate time the vehicle reaches the school area, and the narrow span in which the homicide must have happened. When they layer the school camera's motion events over that span, There is no competing set of headlights, no second vehicle, no foot traffic. In an urban core, that would be unremarkable. In a quiet suburb just after midnight, it's expected and useful. None of this steps outside the bounds of what a jury would one day be allowed to hear if a trial occurred. It's chain of custody clean. Videos copied to secure media, hash values logged, receipt records printed and preserved, witness statements signed and time-stamped. The narrative you're hearing follows the same order the file builds. Establish departure, document the route, fix the arrival window, and hold on conclusions until the lab returns its own confirmations. The cameras do not identify a shooter, they identify opportunity, proximity, and time. Those are anchors that later evidence can grip. One more note, and it's human. People trust nights out to end the way 100 other nights have ended. Home, bed, tomorrow's plans. When that doesn't happen, the only remedy the system can offer is rigor. That means doing the boring work well, even when the footage is dark and the angles are bad. It's not cinematic. It is accountable. And for families who are waiting for answers, accountable is the only thing that matters. The evidence moves from video to verification. Ballistics first. The casings recovered at the lot are examined, photographed, and test-fired against a reference barrel. Toolmark comparison establishes that the group of casings originated from the same handgun. The lab does not publish a caliber or brand. What matters is uniformity. One weapon, multiple discharges, consistent mechanical signatures. Trajectory notes taken at the scene align with the lab's reconstruction. Angles indicate shots fired within a confined footprint near the parking lot lane, consistent with a rapid assault rather than a chase across the asphalt. That confirmation locks what the field team suspected on day one. The parking lot behind the Mountain Brook High School athletic complex is the primary and only scene of the shooting. Range of fire analysis is limited by lighting and substrate, but it's sufficient. Stippling on select wounds and fabric signature suggests close to intermediate distance. There are no soot deposits indicating contact shots. The pattern supports an encounter at the vehicle side or within a few steps of it, not a long-distance shot from cover. The asphalt shows no skid marks and the clothing shows no extensive abrasions, reducing the likelihood of a dragged body or a prolonged physical struggle in that exact spot. For the chain of custody, each casing, swab, and garment stays sealed, logged, and signed through every handoff. Hash values on the digital photo sets match the originals. Autopsy findings provide the second anchor. The medical examiner documents multiple gunshot wounds, including injuries to the back and head. The order of fire isn't asserted publicly, but the examiner identifies a fatal trajectory and corroborates hemorrhage patterns that are consistent with gunfire at the lot. There are no indicators of robbery, no torn pockets, no missing personal effects cited in the inventory, and no findings that point to sexual assault. Toxicology is routine in a homicide. Results are placed in the file and treated as context, not as cause. Time of death estimation aligns with the window established by surveillance and the approach road cameras. Late night into the first minutes of December 1, 2019. Luminol or blood-reactive agents are unnecessary outdoors when visible staining is minimal and the shooting is localized. The focus is gunfire, not cleanup. Swabs from the vehicle's exterior contact points are preserved for DNA and touch profiles. Whether those returns later add value depends on mixture complexity and database eligibility. The lab doesn't speculate. What the lab does certify is matchable physical reality, casing groupings, impact sequencing, and garment-to-wound correspondence. Each of those facts will withstand courtroom scrutiny if challenged, because they are documented with photographs, measurements, and signed reports from identifiable analysts. On the digital side, device forensics continues in parallel. Telemetry is mapped against the lab's arrival-to-shot interval, shrinking uncertainty further. A silent period on the victim's phone coincides with the entry of the vehicle seen on the school camera. The absence of additional vehicles in the lot during the same interval matters. It narrows who could have been present when the shots were fired. The cameras did not capture the discharge, but science closes that gap. Angles, distances, and wound morphology point to a brief, contained encounter at that location. Interviews are now appropriate. The person last seen leaving with Megan must account for the route, the timing, and the presence in or near the lot. A good interview is not a debate. It's a test of consistency against known facts. If a statement claims a different location, the video contradicts it. If it claims a different time, the receipt refutes it. If it claims distance, the range of fire analysis challenges it. The file has graduated from suspicion to structure, the kind that either confirms an account or exposes fabrication without theatrics. One brief acknowledgement belongs here. Families want answers fast. Labs don't move on emotion, they move on standards. That is the point. When cases rely on clear, repeatable measurements, they honor the victim by keeping error out of the story. The findings in this chapter do exactly that. They confirm where the shooting happened, when it most likely happened, and how it occurred within a tight footprint. With video, receipts, and lab work aligned, interviews moved from exploratory to focused. The objective was simple: test a single account against fixed facts. Detectives contacted the person last seen leaving with Megan and scheduled a formal interview at headquarters. For the first time in this narrative, we identify him. Jason Bragg McIntosh, Megan's estranged husband and a former Hoover police officer. The decision to name him now mirrors the case file, only after the corridor to the Mountain Brook High School athletic complex was hardened by cameras, timestamps, and the medical examiner's window. The interview followed standard officer-involved protocols: 2 investigators in the room, a recorded advisement, and a clean chain for every statement and exhibit referenced. McIntosh's initial narrative described a routine night, a brief conversation outside the restaurant area, and a separation that he framed as uneventful. The timeline he offered, departure, route, and when he claimed to be elsewhere, was compared in real time to normalized clocks. Where his account drifted, the team pressed for precision. What time did you leave the corridor? Which road did you take? Where were you when your phone shows inactivity that matches the lot window? A good interview doesn't argue. It forces details to stand next to measured time. In parallel, detectives executed search warrants for devices and a vehicle associated with McIntosh. The orders targeted location histories, recent deletions, and car-based metadata where applicable, garage controller logs, paired Bluetooth histories. The focus was narrow. Either the data supported his claimed movements or it didn't. Investigators also checked any weapons inventory tied to him. Chain of custody documentation captured whether a handgun consistent with lab signatures was lawfully possessed, transferred, or missing. No broad conclusions were written in the margins. The file noted each result and moved to the next test. By this stage, probable cause was no longer hypothetical. The state's evidence stack included 1. Surveillance establishing departure with Megan and a route toward the athletic complex. 2. A limited window in which no other vehicles entered the lot. 3. Autopsy and ballistics confirming a brief, close to intermediate confrontation at that location. When McIntosh's account could not reconcile those anchors, detectives sought a capital murder warrant. He was taken into custody without incident. An initial appearance followed, and the court addressed bond posture in line with Alabama practice. From the narrator's chair, this is where restraint matters. The presence of prior domestic violence documentation in 2019 is context, not a shortcut to guilt. What moved the needle here were present tense artifacts: cameras, casings, timestamps, and a statement that didn't match them. Families deserve a process that is thorough enough to survive the hardest questions later. In cases like this, thoroughness is the point. Every hinge in the file can be opened, examined, and shown to a jury if needed. The case now had structure: a fixed scene, a fixed window, a named defendant in custody, and a record that explained how investigators got there. Next steps would live in court calendars: indictment posture, discovery, and decisions about whether a capital charge proceeds to trial or resolves another way. We'll walk that path in order, the same way the file did. When a subject's timeline conflicts with synchronized cameras and autopsy timing, which do you weigh first? The statement's internal consistency or the device and video clocks that don't move? Once custody was secured, the file moved to the grand jury. Prosecutors presented a streamlined package: the departure with Megan from the restaurant corridor, the route toward the Mountain Brook High School athletic complex, the tight window on the lot, and the lab work that confirmed close to intermediate gunfire at that location. Witness statements were limited and carefully sourced. The point wasn't volume, it was cohesion. The grand jury returned a capital murder indictment, setting a trial track that on paper could run the full distance. Discovery obligations followed. The state disclosed video exports with hash values, autopsy and ballistics reports, chain of custody logs, and the interview recording from headquarters. Defense counsel received the same clock the jury would one day see, timestamps that had been normalized across cameras and receipts. They also received the lab's confirmation that the parking lot behind Mountain Brook High School's athletic complex was the primary and only scene. In Alabama practice, capital exposure carries unique stakes. Everyone in the room understood that, including the victim's family, whose interests, clarity, accountability, finality, do not always align with the long arc of a capital trial. Pretrial posture was predictable. Defense examined every hinge for mechanical weakness. Was the camera time truly synchronized to a reference clock? Were there any breaks in chain for the casings or the garments? Did the interview honor advisements and avoid improper prompts? The answers mattered less as talking points and more as survivability at a suppression hearing or on appeal. Meanwhile, prosecutors pressure tested their own theory. They did not need video of the shots. They needed a sequence a jury could follow without inference stacking. Here, the sequence held. With Megan toward the lot, no competing vehicles in the window, gunfire confirmed on the lot, an account that could not reconcile those anchors. At this stage in many homicide cases, two tracks run at once. The state prepares for trial, jury instructions, anticipated expert testimony, exhibit lists, while counsel explores whether a resolution short of trial can meet statutory and ethical requirements. That conversation isn't about sentiment, it's risk math. What sentence can be secured today with legal certainty versus what a jury might do a year from now after a capital presentation? Families are briefed on the options and the trade-offs. Some want the full trial record. Others want a guaranteed outcome that avoids re-traumatization and years of litigation. Neither position is wrong. The system has to be honest about consequences either way. From the narrator's chair, one thing stands out about this file. The evidence pillars support each other. The cameras don't stand alone. They tie to receipts. The receipts don't stand alone. They tie to device inactivity that tracks the lot window. The lab doesn't stand alone. It explains range and sequence consistent with a brief encounter at the car. A trial lawyer reads that stack and asks a practical question. Which of those pillars could be knocked out without collapsing the others? In this case, redundancy is high. That is the kind of file that often invites a plea discussion even after a capital indictment. The defense assessment mirrored that reality. If the explanation offered in interview could not survive the clock, what alternative theory could be presented without opening new vulnerabilities? If no alternate vehicle or third party appears in the lot window, how would a jury be asked to distribute reasonable doubt? Jurors are told not to speculate. They are told to weigh what is in evidence. When the evidence points in one direction and the timeline is narrow, the path to a negotiated resolution widens. Prosecutors weighed another factor, the victim's prior help-seeking in 2019. Those records were context, not proof, but they would frame a narrative about escalation around separation. In front of a jury, that context risks overshadowing the core forensic story. In a negotiated resolution, the state can insist on an admission that locks accountability without inviting a contest over past paperwork. That distinction matters to families who want the record to be clean, what happened, where it happened, and who is responsible, without relitigating every page of the year before. By the time the court set a fuller pretrial calendar, both sides understood the stakes. The state had a capital count and a file built to survive. The defense had a client with exposure to the most severe penalties Alabama law allows. The venue remained Mountain Brook for the crime scene, Jefferson County for the court, and the facts did not drift. What changed was the conversation, trial or certainty. Not every case earns that choice. This one did because the timeline and the lab work left little unaccounted for. A brief human note, kept measured. Families need more than an arrest. They need an outcome that sticks. Trials can deliver that, but they also carry risk and delay. Pleas can deliver that, but only if the terms reflect the gravity of the homicide and the life lost. The justice system can't give back what was taken. It can give an answer that the record will carry forward without wobble. By spring 2021, the file was trial-ready, synchronized video, matched receipts, a hardened path of travel to the Mountain Brook High School athletic complex, and lab work confirming close to intermediate gunfire at that lot. Defense counsel had every exhibit the jury would see, hash-verified video exports, chain of custody logs, ballistics and autopsy reports, and the recorded interview. On paper, the state could proceed on a capital count. In practice, both sides understood the risk and the cost of trying a case whose core facts were already fixed in time. In open court, Jason Bragg McIntosh stood and entered a plea of guilty to intentional murder for the killing of Megan Montgomery. The capital track ended there. No jury was seated, no alternate ending existed. The allocution placed responsibility on the record, the victim, the location, the date. The court accepted the plea and imposed a 30-year sentence in the Alabama Department of Corrections. The judgment captured what the investigation had established. One scene, one timeline, one offender. The hearing was not theater. It was procedure. Rights acknowledged, factual basis recited, sentence pronounced. The state noted why resolution made sense. The evidence pillars reinforced each other, the lot window was narrow, and the account McIntosh had offered could not reconcile with synchronized clocks. The defense spoke to finality and certainty. The judge addressed the family and the community, making plain that the sentence reflected the gravity of killing a person who had asked authorities for help earlier that year. When a record is this clear, the most honest thing a courtroom can do is to enter it cleanly and close the book on speculation. What followed was not closure so much as direction. Megan had worked to help others recognize risk. After her death, those efforts carried her name. Local advocates use this case to explain why separation periods are dangerous, why early reporting matters, and why systems have to coordinate in real time. None of that rewrites the past. It improves the present for the next person who reaches out. If you're listening and you need help, the most important step is the first one. Make the call. Tell someone. Let the system start working for you. In the language of case files, prevention isn't a slogan. It's a series of documented actions that create options before a crisis. For the record, the narrative never drifted. The parking lot at Mountain Brook High School's athletic complex remained the sole scene from discovery through sentencing. The timeline stayed anchored to the late hours of November 30th into December 1st, 2019, in Mountain Brook, Alabama, USA. The defendant was consistently identified as Jason Bragg McIntosh, Megan's estranged husband and a former Hoover police officer. And the outcome stayed single and specific. Guilty to intentional murder. 30 years, 2021. There is no second version here, no alternate verdict, no mysterious appeal that undid the result. The case resolved the way the evidence said it should. A brief, measured reflection belongs at the end. True crime stories aren't entertainment to the people who live them. Families want accuracy, not drama. This file delivered accuracy, clock-to-clock movement, a lab-confirmed scene, and an admission that matched both. If there is meaning to carry forward, it is this. Good policing is patient, good prosecution is disciplined, and accountability is strongest when it rests on facts that can be shown, not just told. Megan's life deserves that standard. So does every life that touches a case like this. We close where we began, a quiet lot, a compressed window, and a system that chose rigor over noise. The plea did not erase loss, but it did fix responsibility in a way that will stand. That is what remains. When I look back on Megan's story, what stays with me is not just the crime itself, but the warning signs she bravely spoke about before it was too late. If there's one lesson here, it's that reaching out for help is never weakness. It's strength, and it can save lives. As a community, we must listen, act, and stand beside those in danger. Now, I'd love to hear from you. What do you take away from this case? Share your thoughts in the comments and let me know where you're watching from. If this video touched you, please hit subscribe so you won't miss the next story. Together, we can keep these conversations alive.